I'm interested.
The truth will set you free. The truth will set you free.
Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Right now I'm going to attempt to examine the Bible and dissect some of the churchy language that we can easily take for granted, digging into history and languages when I'm able to try and get at the heart of the text so we can hopefully see and apply some of what God has for us in these words today. Now, I'm not formally trained in Scripture. I'm just a guy using resources and a questioning mind to try and get at the truth. That's something that we can all do. I hope you'll do that with me. This time I am doing something a little different than I normally do on In Search of Truth. I'm not taking as deep a dive into a portion of the Bible, and I'm also diverting from the book of James for the moment, and I want to take us through a psalm, specifically Psalm 16. I got this idea from just the fact that I'm in a really busy season right now with E3 and other things coming up, and I was looking at my calendar and realizing I'm not going to have time to really do the kind of prep that I would want to do on James, to do a section of James again. But I know that some of you guys really look forward to the Bible study each week, and so I wanted to have something that I could put in place of it during some of these busy seasons where maybe for weeks at a time I'm not going to be able to do the normal In Search of Truth study. And so what I'm introducing now is a version of the In Search of Truth segment that is focused on geek psalms. Now, I mean, psalms are for everybody, not just for geeks, but specifically what I'll do with this kind of subcategory version of In Search of Truth is highlight some psalms that I've found to be specifically helpful to me as it relates to my temperament as a geek. I took about a year and a half with my study mentor, and we went through the Psalms together, taking a deep dive into them as much as I was able anyway. And that's left me with a number of Psalms that I have really become meaningful to me and that I continue to come back to again and again and again. And the first one of those that I think I would want to highlight is Psalm 16. And what I want to do is, again, rather than a deep dive, just kind of walk you through what I have been doing for the last year or so after doing the more in-depth study of Psalms. As I've come back to the Psalms, I am reading through them, reminding myself of kind of like the context and any kind of like cultural concerns I might want to be aware of, so that I can at least have a basic grasp of what's going on in the psalm and what the psalmist is talking about, and then just meditating on it and reflecting on my own life and what I can take from this psalm that's relevant to me. So less of a deep dive, a little bit more of a devotional kind of style. Anyway, looking at Psalm 16. Written by, likely, King David, the psalmist says in verse 1, "Preserve me, O God, for in you I take refuge." So right away he's expressing just his trust in Yahweh. I don't think being a worrier is necessarily a geek trait, but it's certainly a trait for me. And so just remembering to trust in God is something that even lately I've really been struggling with, and so this reminder is really valuable to me. Verse 2, he says, "I say to Yahweh," which is God's personal name, which is what's in the original text there whenever we see Lord in all caps. "I say to Yahweh, you are my Adonai," or "you are my Lord. I have no good apart from you." And I think that's really valuable for me and for geeks to remember that everything good that we enjoy is not this compartmentalized thing that's just part of the world, but every good experience we have, even those that we misuse or taint in some way, all the pleasure we're capable of experiencing is a gift from God, as a result from how He made us and how He made the world around us. And so all the good things that we have are sourced in God. I have no good apart from you. And so what I want to get better at is associating the things that I enjoy with God, remembering that they're a gift from Him, that they reflect in some way His character and His goodness. Verse 3, "As for the saints in the land, they are the excellent ones, in whom is all my delight." This is the ESV translation, by the way, if you're wondering. And so this reminds me that as much as I want to be a lone ranger, as much as I'm introverted and want to just kind of like do the Christian journey by myself, No, the psalmist here says, as for the saints in the land, the fellow believers, in other words, they are the excellent ones in whom is all my delight. And specifically, these are these saints, these fellow believers that are pursuing righteousness. And he finds delight in that. And I think that's a model for me to remember. I should look for ways to find delight, interacting with, learning from, being inspired by the other believers that are in my life, that are part of my local church community. Verse 4, the sorrows of those who run after another god shall multiply. Their drink offerings of blood I will not pour out, or even take their names on my lips. And so here's his dedication to saying, I am not going to involve myself with the things that the world is pursuing. And at that time, it was pursuit of other gods, worshiping other gods. But the analog today would, of course, be a number of other things, in addition to possibly, worshiping other gods. But for us as geeks, for me, I think of, getting caught up in just materialism, getting caught up in the hype of the next big thing and just obsessively thinking about it, or attaching my sense of hope and happiness to the next cool thing that is coming out from geek entertainment that I might be able to enjoy. No, he's committing himself to not being caught up in pursuing the things that the world around him is pursuing, but to have his value system totally founded in God. So he's not going to, in a direct way, participate in, what, in a full-on way, participate in what the world is pursuing. He says, their drink offerings of blood I will not pour out, but he also adds, or take their names on my lips. So whether in a fully involved way or in a lighter way, he's not going to involve himself in the pursuits of the rest of the world. Verse 5, Yahweh is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. The lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance. And so he's recognizing that God is the source of, not only the source of all that he has that's good, but all that he will enjoy, all that he will inherit from God. And as he estimates that, as he estimates the worth of that, he says, the lines have fallen for me in pleasant places, like property lines, like I'm getting a really good deal out of this. I have this beautiful inheritance. And so God is going to be my chosen cup. He's going to be my lot in life. He is what I am going to say, this is what I have, Verse 7, I bless Yahweh who gives me counsel. In the night also my heart instructs me. I think that's really interesting. He's pursuing Yahweh for counsel, for direction in life. And if you've ingested my content for a while, you know that I have big problems with the whole idea of following your heart and trusting in your heart and stuff like that. But there is an exception to that, and that is when our heart has been shaped and molded by the counsel of God. And that's what we're seeing the psalmist talk about here, that Yahweh gives him counsel, and in the night also his heart instructs me, because it's echoing the counsel of God. And so when we are immersing ourselves in the counsel of God, when we are seeking him again and again in our day-to-day lives, then we can more and more trust the things that our heart tells us as we're kind of musing and wondering and meditating about the situations we have in life, because our heart is more often going to be echoing the words, the counsel of God. Verse 8, he says, I have set Yahweh always before me. Because he is at my right hand, I shall not be shaken. And so he's got his eyes, his focus on Yahweh, on God. And in light of that, has this firm confidence that he will not be shaken, because he recognizes that God is right there with him. Verse 9, therefore my heart is glad and my whole being rejoices. That's a challenge to me. Sometimes when I read the Psalms, I just think, man, this psalmist is spiritually in just a much more advanced place than I am. I really would love for my whole being to rejoice because of God. And that's where he's at. My heart is glad, my whole being rejoices. My flesh also dwells secure, for you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, or let your Holy One see corruption, he says there in verse 10. And so he's got this confidence in the future as well, the future of his body. the future of his flesh, because he trusts that God is not going to abandon his soul to Sheol, and that's what they called just the grave that everyone would go into. They didn't have a real fleshed out concept of the afterlife. They just mostly spoke in terms of the grave, Sheol. And but his confidence is, you're not going to abandon me to that state. You're not going to allow your Holy One, which this verse does look ahead. It has parallel interpretations. It does look ahead to Christ, and this verse 10 is quoted in the New Testament referring to Christ. But just keeping it in this context for right now, it does refer to the psalmist as well, that you are not going to allow me, the person who has dedicated himself to you, that's the idea of Holy One, you're not going to allow my flesh to see corruption, to be separated from you. That is not my fate. And then finally, in verse 11, he says, you make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. And so there's some overlap here in him talking about this present life and also keeping his eyes fixed on eternity. You make known to me the path of life right now, how I can experience the vibrant life that you want me to experience. You make that path known to me. And again, he's speaking in the context of being separated to the purposes of God, being holy to God, and embracing his counsel, seeking out his counsel. This is all said in that context. You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. And so there's this sense he's expressing that right now he can experience this fullness of joy as he fixates on and recognizes the presence of God. But there's also overlap, because then it bleeds over into the final statement, at your right hand are pleasures forevermore. So he's looking ahead into eternity, that in his presence, in God's presence in eternity, there is fullness of joy, pleasures forevermore. And so rather than being so fixated as I think I can be, and as many geeks can be, on the here and now, which I think is the result of all these fun things that we enjoy as geeks that are about the here and now. This game I'm playing, this movie I'm watching, this book I'm reading, this thing I'm doing right now. So much of being a geek is fixated on the now. And so I think a psalm like this is so valuable for me and for, I think, all geeks to remember, let's not fixate on the now. Let's not fix our hope on the now, but recognize how much better the now can be, how much more stable and predictably joyful and peaceful our lives can be as we're seeking out God's counsel and how it applies to our lives and our perspectives now, and then also looking ahead to all that he promises for us in eternity, despite what we are enduring right now. Keeping our eyes fixed on that really makes a huge difference in how we experience life and endure life right now. So Psalm 16 just continues. I've got a couple things underlined in there. I've got the whole psalm marked in general as one that I just need to come back to because it's a real blessing to me. So I hope it's a blessing to you as well.